Good evening to all of you Sunday night regulars. Welcome back from your travels. I just got back from Vashon Island, where I attended a dedication ceremony for the Vashon Island Zen Center. They have been there for years, and they finally got a property. They bought an old funeral home.
My.
And they have acres and acres. And they're so excited about developing a beautiful garden. And I just had to chuckle because, you know, we get into a space and we we don't even realize how much work we're taking on. But it was a wonderful occasion. And there were many, many old friends who I saw there from various moments in my Zen past. And the ceremony was great and gave me some clarity about how to approach our own, which is coming up in January, our own dedication, which is only coming up a long time after we're here because of circumstances, causes and conditions. And we can make the best plans, but we never know how everything is going to unfold. So right now we think we're having our dedication in January. And maybe we will. So all of this is apropos of my talk tonight, which is Don't Know Mind. The talk about Don't Know Mind. And if you've been around Zen much, you've heard this phrase a lot. We practice with Don't Know Mind. And usually when we hear a phrase like this, kind of the ordinary associations with not knowing come up immediately to us. You know, you can think of it as an insult, you know, don't know mind, oh you idiot. Or what was I thinking? So it's in the usual way, it's the last thing we would want to have is don't know mind. It's in the usual way we want to know. From the time we're tiny, you know, it's all about mastering and knowing who we are and what's going on and understanding things. So, so not knowing, in this sense, is part of the world of judgment. You know, we can easily bring judgment when we're talking about not knowing. When we're in reference to the self, which what women, I love this line, always a knit of identity, always distinctions. And that's who knows usually. It's this knit of identity that we are really identify ourselves with, always making distinctions and comparing, so that's comparing mind. So at this celebration yesterday, I was filled with comparing mind. It was really very striking to me how many times I found myself comparing that group to ours, and actually it's just the same as ours. Your faces are a little different, although not completely. Yeah. It was rather similar to when we had our open house. We had large numbers showing up, many of whom didn't know anything about Zen. They were just curious about this new center. So we're always comparing and thinking about judging, evaluating. Do I like it? Is this good? Is this a little weird? So often when we say, I know, what we mean is, I agree. Somebody says something and you say, yeah, I know. Yeah, I agree. I see it that way too. Or you can say, I know, with some nuance, like, I know. You know, I mean, I remember my kids always just being really like, I know, Mom. So it's a lot about self. The knowing mind is a lot about self, the dearly held self, which we all have, which we all need. So don't know mind is not a judgment about the mind that knows, but it's about seeing what else is there beside the usual knowing. When it comes to small matters, we can easily say, I don't know. Somebody says, oh, what's the name of our new neighbors? Oh, I don't know. That's not an issue. Or what temperature is it outside? I don't know. That's not a problem. But sometimes it doesn't even occur to us that we can actually find relief when we give ourselves permission to not know, when actually we don't know. We mostly don't know. Perfectly okay, no problem. Not knowing, living a life of not knowing simplifies. When we have permission not to always know, it's really a relief. Of course, we don't even need to know nearly as much as we used to, because now we have Google, and Google knows everything. So if we don't know, we can just Google it. But when knowing becomes the foundation of the self, of who I am, the yarn that is knitted into the cloth of who I think I am, it gets caught up in it, this knowing. The usual way of conducting business is a very self-centered, I know, kind of a place to live from, centered around the individual self, the habituated self, the one that's been through this same old day many, many times. I know this life that I'm living. Until, of course, something comes along and we clearly, unavoidably don't know. We may not, before that happens, we may not notice how we're settling for a very limited way of being present in the world. The world seems so much more limited before don't know mind strikes up, reveals itself. So here's a poem about what happens when we haven't yet discovered don't know mind. See if you can guess who wrote it. There's no earthly way of knowing which direction they are going. There's no knowing where they're rowing or which way the river's flowing. No, not a speck of light is showing. So the danger must be growing. For the rowers keep on rowing, and they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing.
Dr. Seuss.
It's kind of like Dr. Seuss.
Chocolate Factory.
Roald Dahl. Yeah. Let me just read it again. I just thought this was so amusing when I came across it. There's no earthly way of knowing. And so actually, don't know mind is no earthly way of knowing, isn't it? It's really recognizing. There's no earthly way of knowing which direction they are going. There's no knowing where they're rowing or which way the river's flowing. Not a speck of light is showing. So the danger must be growing. For the rowers keep on rowing, and they're certainly not showing any signs that they are slowing. This would really apply to our collective life at the moment, I think. It really applies. It's always nice to have a little humor in this dire situation that we're in the world. So the rowers are us before we realize don't know mind, or whenever we forget don't know mind, which is often for me. It's a sensibility that is awake to everything that we don't know. which is mostly everything. The conditions that we're not aware of and can't be aware of, because they're infinite. And infinite conditions are always unfolding, moving along. So the sensibility of being awake to all that is not known, it doesn't mean that we assume that we shouldn't be making any judgments or we shouldn't be making any plans, because we do, we need to. Living with don't know mind is not having no involvement with life. It's kind of the opposite. So when we involve ourselves with life, we make plans. You know, every week you get 2 newsletters from this little place telling you what the plans are. So, but then it changes, and we need to be able to adapt. And when don't know mind is really alive in us, we're ready to, this phrase in Zen, turn on a dime. When things change unexpectedly, we don't expend a lot of energy trying to resist it or make it a bad thing or anything, but just, okay, then what? Now what do we do? And in the development of this center and ongoingly, we're always saying, okay, well, what do we do now? How do we handle this? But when we refuse to adapt and continue to insist that things be the way we thought they were or the way we want them to be, then our problems get deeper and our suffering really gets more difficult. Don't know mind. So this is the mind that we could say is in practice, it isn't identified with the ego self, the I, me, and mine self. One of the mistaken ideas about practice is that we're supposed to get over the I. Like there's something wrong with the ego. There isn't an ego, but there is definitely a self-involvement and a self-reference that can squeeze limitations and possibilities when that's our only reference, when we're not paying attention to the wider set of circumstances and needs. Separate self, the one who is oriented to the conventional version of things. And I'm always reminded of this when I watch the news and the way that the circumstances in the world are laid out. It's very self-organized, self-referential. Whatever we're habituated to is self-referential. And usually we get really accustomed, really habituated to our own story about how the world is and what everything means. Including in a spiritual sense, the way often people will say when something doesn't go the way you want it to go, they say, oh, the universe is telling me I'm supposed to be doing something else. Well, that's a very self-referential spiritual statement, isn't it? So the universe is really pointed at the little self. That's an interpretation of how it feels. It's just like, oh, well, what I thought I should do clearly is not going to happen. But the agency there is the self rather than the universe. So don't know mind is a different view, and it's a much more general attitude. It saturates how we abide in the present moment. it's a more general attitude of uncertainty, the principle of uncertainty. One that acknowledges that everything is actually truly uncertain, because it is the continually unfolding outcome of infinite conditions. We get up in the morning, we have an agenda, and then things slide sideways. Not always, but often enough to teach us that when we think we know what we're going to be doing, it's actually all quite provisional. It's quite wonderful, you know, you have a plan and it just unfolds. That's great. Because it suggests that actually you have been, in this instance, aligned with the true conditions. But in the morning you hang out the laundry to dry, and by afternoon it's dry. That's what you do when you're hanging out the laundry in the morning. You're expecting that everything is going to hold steady. But sometimes, of course, a sudden storm comes up, and then the best laid plans of mice and men get wet all over again. Surprise! So what else does the storm bring? What else is there in any of the storms that come along? I came across this line, poems come out of wonder, not out of knowing. And the magic of life comes out of not knowing. The wonder of life comes out of not knowing and appreciating what shows up without us having known it was coming. Don't know mind doesn't know about a future, doesn't need to know what comes next, doesn't know all the conditions that are in play. The conditions in the natural world, wind, water, air, temperature, whatever is immediately available to the senses, and beyond them, and all the information that we get all the time, directly in our awareness and out of our awareness. We're always receiving a lot of information. And it's always developing and having effects on what comes next. So don't know mind refers to the ever-changing nature of all conditioned things, and the effects of time, of duration. Practicing with don't know mind requires us to stay open. And sitting in Zazen, that's what sitting in Zazen is all about. That's the practice. We place our bodies in the position, and we still all physical motion, and we don't know what will come along. We don't know what will come into awareness, into our senses, into our energy body. You know, you can begin very restless, and then all of a sudden you're calm, and that restlessness is gone, or the other way around. Huh? You never know what's going to come when you're doing Zazen. I think I've told this story about being at a sesshin years ago, and sitting in a fairly narrow room, and the people facing on the other side were fairly close, about 8 feet. Quiet. It was the middle of the afternoon, probably half the Zendo was asleep. It was hot. And all of a sudden, the whole place started to shake. And I looked across. The person sitting across from me, he said, "Very quiet." And then we kept on sitting. Because what else? What are you going to do, right? The place didn't collapse, so we just kept sitting. But that was a great demonstration of you never know. You just never know what's going to happen when you sit down. When we're practicing, when we're doing Zazen, we're not grabbing onto any experience, and we're also not naming it. We're not pushing it away. Although we may be doing all of those things and we notice it, because it happens, right? And then we don't judge it. But we may judge it, and then we notice that. And that's all part of the genius of Zazen practice, is because we notice everything. And the mind creates the entirety of our experience. It arises in the mind. There's experience nowhere but in the mind. We don't know mind, we open in this unfolding, flowing present moment in sound. You notice what the sounds are right now? You say it's silent, it's not silent. Somebody's coughing or those machines are going off to purify the air. There's bird song, a car going by. Or there's sensation, there's an itch. And of course, once there's an itch and you start to fixate on it, it's going to start all the other itches off. That's a wonderful moment in Zazen, when you do the itch. Or where you get restless. So restless. You feel like you're going to blast off a cushion. There you sit, completely still. But the experience is of profound restlessness. So these are wonderful conditions for the mind to open, for us to become aware of mind, of the mind-created nature of our life. Open this completeness of any moment. No mind is wise. It's also humble. Wise because what is wisdom? It's this true situation, being aware of the true situation. And even if you don't know particulars, you don't know. So it's innately wise. And then humble because it's not about self-centered view. We realize how limited any of our views are. To sit in Zazen, we have to give up any demands or require anything. And not only in Zazen, but at all times, with Don't Know Mind, requiring nothing but what is. And appreciating the play of whatever comes forward. So it doesn't mean that we don't plan, we don't have certain expectations, but the load of our expectations is considerably lighter when we really have awakened to Don't Know Mind. We are liberated to be fully here and not to get too upset when things are really different than before, no matter what's going on. So Isa, the poet Isa, has this lovely little poem. It goes, not knowing, it's a tub therein, the fish cooling at the gate. Not knowing, it's a tub therein, the fish cooling at the gate. So what tub are you in? Does anything need to be known to cool in these waters and enjoy the cool? Are we in a tub? Are you in a tub? So I wanted to open it up to a couple of questions, if anybody has questions about this or comments. Mike?
I was wondering how you would deal with, I remember I got through somebody maybe 20 years ago who suggested responses, but is that so? And where does that fit in to the don't know mind?
It's a way of saying it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something comes along, you say, oh, is that so? Holly?
About a year ago, thinking about the concept of the mind, I decided that it's all biochemistry. And there's so many reactions going on everywhere. We can't know. so if I just say it's all biochemistry.
Mhm. That's one of the forms of knowing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so.
Knowing and not knowing, yeah.
Mhm.
It's really a point of view, isn't it? On the one hand, it can be a form of knowing that that kind of limits, or it can be a form of not knowing and asking, oh, is that so? Mm. Yeah. Very.
So this reminds me of on Thursday, I was talking about a technique that I was trying and how sometimes I would get it and sometimes I wouldn't. And what you said about that was there is no solution to samsara. I keep bringing that sentence back. All week I've been pondering this, that there is no solution to samsara. And I think it's related to don't know mind. Because as soon as you try to solve things with techniques or answers or definitions, you're back in samsara. I love that sentence, there's no solution to samsara.
All conditioned things. I mean, that's what the Buddha insisted on. All conditioned things. When we take refuge in anything, any condition, then it's marked by impermanence and dissatisfaction.
Even if we take refuge in zazen and our techniques and our, in our philosophy of what the world is.
And another, what's his name, Sawaki Roshi said, zazen is good for nothing. That's another way of saying, insisting on don't know mind. You know, this isn't a solution, which is one reason why we don't proselytize, because it's not going to work for everybody. It's going to be another hell realm for some people, actually, or for us sometimes. And yet, we practice. I mean, there is no solution to samsara, and yet there is nirvana, which is really, in a way we could say nirvana and don't know mind. Infinite flexibility, infinite openness, infinite surprise and wonder. Carol?
I was in my painting studio for, today and over the past week some, and this don't know mind comes up in my creative process as an artist when, of course I like to be, in the flow, in contact, be sort of in the sense of mystery when what's emerging is a surprise to me. But when as that happens, I can notice then maybe on the next painting or when I want to continue that, then the grasping sets in and I'm grasping to know. And as soon as I'm grasping to know, I'm not in the flow anymore. Well, that's been happening for as long as I've been painting. And I just have to keep going back to it, and just like, zazen. But there's something that settles in me, a quietness, a not wanting to know that brings some sense of, a contact with a mystery that is deeply satisfying and a surprise.
Yeah, that brings to mind one of the one of the traps in practice, which is when you have some kind of opening, you have a moment of completeness, of openness, of relief, of revelation, and you really want to get it back. Once you have it, you want it again, or you want to keep it. So that's that process of from not knowing to knowing. Somebody was asking me yesterday, what is an opening? What is an opening? And the beauty of a question like that is that we each have to kind of contact that. You use the word contact. There's something that it's very descriptive. There's an opening beyond thought. There's a direct experience of, oh, this is perfect. Perfection. But not even that. No words. So I wanted to bring up not knowing, because we do use it. And I wanted to encourage everybody to approach your practice. Approach not knowing as part of the practice. During the day, at work, and when you're doing zazen, and when you're settling in to go to sleep at night. Dreams will emerge. And when you wake up in the morning, I wonder about this day. Let's see how it unfolds.